The 3 reasons you don't get referrals. Hello, everyone. My name is Tessa, and I'm here to introduce you to Reagan Rodriguez. Reagan is a futurist who teaches stratosphere wealthy legacy families how to become impact investors. So, Reagan, we have a guest
Yes,
on today's show for the Futurist Mindset, don't we?
we do. And I have known Frank Agin for a little over 20 years. He has been a mentor of mine for about that long as well. There were some years in between that we didn't keep in touch. And then we did a few years ago. And he runs a very successful organization out of Columbus, Ohio. He's even franchised the concept, and they're spread out throughout the United States. I knew him when he was first franchising it, and then when he started expanding here to South Florida, when I later moved here, I said, "Hey, I want to be a part of a chapter just like I was before." So, on that note, why don't I turn it over to you, Frank?
What do you want me to do? We have known each other. What you're supposed to say is we've known each other
Yeah.
a lot of years, and just leave out the 20 and just let people use their own imagination as to what a lot of years is, you know?
Well, there's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because what happened was I had stopped being a member of AmSpirit
Yep.
for really kind of pride reasons. I thought, well, my business is growing. I don't need the business. Then after the pandemic, that was when I saw a promotion on LinkedIn that Frank mentioned something. And I thought, you know what? The most productive times in my life was when I was part of AmSpirit.
Yeah.
And I thought the times that my business kind of fluctuated up and down was when I wasn't a part of it. And then I went and visited, I went to Columbus, Ohio, and I visited one of the largest chapters that you've got there. I think is that Arlington chapter,
Yep.
Frank?
Yep.
And I started running into people that had been there over 20 years that are still in it.
Yep.
And I noticed how their businesses are prospering. Then I also ran into Gina 2, 3 days later, and I see how her exact words were. I remember her saying to me, "I'm at a really good place in my life." And she's showing me pictures of her home, all the stuff. And I remember when she was first in AmSpirit and struggling to get business. So that was the part I didn't want to mention was I left, and then the way God had it, we got reconnected again. So on that
Well,
note,
tell
Frank,
us.
why? Yeah,
Yeah,
tell us
I was going
what.
to say, tell us about AmSpirit so we know what this is, because I'm sure people are curious. What is this that Regan's so excited about?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Frank. You take
Yeah,
it from here,
no.
buddy.
What we do at AmSpirit Business Connections is we build groups, help people, help entrepreneurs, sales reps, professionals, build these weekly groups where people learn about each other and through the process exchange referrals. It's a networking organization, but it's really focused in on referrals, and it's a weekly meeting that people go to. As Regan has referenced, the group you went to with Dean. And it really becomes part of their marketing. They get together with people, and because it's every week, I mean, they really like each other. I mean, it's, every week, you know what, these are like going to high school and hanging out with your buddies, but with the added bonus of the people really care. And the groups are made up of people who really aren't competing with one another. So when I was an attorney, somebody would come to me and say, "Hey, I'm looking for," a client would say, I'm looking to start a business. Great. I've got an accountant that you can use. I've got an insurance person. Here's the banker. And so that's the organization that I, along with many others, have helped build really around the country.
Love it. I can't say enough about those business environments where they become family. I've been in networking groups similar. I need to find out about AmSpirit, honestly. I mean, if you have one in Tennessee, but they become family, like you said. But you're also referring business to each other, so it's so healthy for your business and for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's
Frank, I
great.
wanted to share a story based on what you said, Tessa. There was a story I remember Frank told me about somebody that he was going to go on vacation. It was summer, their kids, it was the time to go on vacation. They purposely planned their vacation that they would go on, and I don't know what day of the week it was, Wednesday or Thursday after the AmSpirit. So everybody knew that he was going on vacation. He shows up and he's, I think, dressed kind of casual in sweats, right? Something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And looked at him and go, oh, what are you doing? He goes, oh, right after this, we've already got the car packed and we're leaving, but I wasn't going to go on vacation without going to my AmSpirit group in the morning. Did I butcher that story up? I wasn't
No,
there. So,
I was at a chapter this morning, and that same thing. The guy's like, "Hey, my wife and I were going on this trip. The travel agent's got us set up," and everyone's like, "Oh, so you're going to miss next week?" He's like, "No, I'm not missing next week. We've worked it out so I can be back. After we're leaving here, we're going to go, and then we'll be back in time to go to our meeting." So it's a neat thing.
That says a lot that people are willing to bend, their vacation around the value that they see in it.
Yeah. I don't require it. I don't even necessarily encourage it. I just think it's funny that people do those things. But I guess I'm the same way with respect to different things in my life too.
That's amazing.
Frank, what else would you like to talk about AmSpirit? As you know, I'm going to be launching a new chapter here in Coral Gables. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Do you want to talk about the benefits of AmSpirit? I wanted to give you a chance to say what's kind of in your heart.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I mean, I think there are a lot of networking groups out there. I tell people that if you get a box of donuts or a keg of beer, you can have a networking group because you can bring people in. But I tell people, the reason that you're in a group is to get referrals. That's why you're there. None of us are lonely. Hopefully none of us are lonely. We're there to get referrals. And so I don't want to say why we try to be different because I don't know enough about other groups, but where we really focus our time and attention is on helping our members understand how referrals work, why they work, why they don't work. Tessa, you led this off with the 3 reasons people don't get referrals. And that's something that we hammer on. And there are only 3 reasons. People come to me all the time. I'm not getting referrals, Frank. And we'll just dissect it. And it's always one of these 3 reasons. 1, they don't have a relationship, right? That financial advisor that calls you out of the blue from Rhode Island wanting you to be their client. It's like, I don't even know you. I don't have a relationship. They could be the best financial advisor in the world, but I don't know them. So you have to have a relationship. But the second piece is that people need to be able to recognize opportunities for you. And that's where people fall down the most was like I was talking to a banker stood up at one of our groups the other day, and he said, I help my clients with all sorts of treasury management needs. And I talked to him after the meeting. It's like, listen, nobody knows what treasury management means.
That's exactly what I was thinking in my head.
Yeah, well, I didn't know, and I told him, I said, I went to law school, and I don't know. I'm sure the plumber sitting next to me was less clued in. And everybody likes this person, but if they even, liking him is not enough. He needs to create recognition. He needs to dumb it down. So, hey, when you see this situation, when you talk to somebody who's complaining about being slow getting their money from clients, that's a treasury management thing, so explain it that way. Don't use the jargon. So that's the second reason. And the third reason is that people have a relationship and they do a wonderful job of explaining what they're about, what they're looking for, and people are able to recognize those things. But they might be uncomfortable talking to somebody about it. So it might be something like life insurance, right? I mean, that's a touchy subject. I know a life insurance person, think he's a great person, want to help him, and he's done a wonderful job of explaining to me when people need life insurance. If I run into somebody, I might, depending upon who it is, I'm just, it's a tough subject. And so what that life insurance person needs to do is help me, empower me with words, phrases, an approach to talking to the person in a comfortable manner. Have you ever thought about having life insurance? That could help you with whatever your situation is. So it's always one of those three things. And, with AmSpirit, those are the things we're focused on. I tell people all the time, you're here for us to help you grow your business, not for us to grow my business. And so I'm not so concerned about chapters getting gigantic. I want chapters to be productive. I was at a chapter this morning. Actually, it was one of the chapters that you worked with when you were here in Columbus, Mel Rahoviak.
Yeah,
They're still going
sure.
great. They just, they were 6 members for the longest time. They just added 7 and 8, and they've never been a large chapter, but they love the organization because we're always working with them on referrals and giving them ideas on how they can do business with each other, and that's what matters most.
And they've been meeting every week for how many years now? It's been over 20 years, right?
Oh, it goes back into the late 90s. Yeah, we were talking about it this morning. It goes back into the late 90s. 2 of them who started it, Mel Rahoviak and John Stamolis. It was 99 or something like that. Yeah, it's been a while.
Frank, I would like you to also maybe promote a little bit the franchise opportunities. And what I was thinking might make sense, unless you want to do it differently, it just hit me, is your story of how you got started. You were an attorney. You didn't like being an attorney, but you were now self-employed attorney. And then from there, things started taking off. And then maybe talk about how many chapters or people there are throughout the United States. And then from there, I want to also talk a little bit about why it makes sense for someone to buy the franchise if they own another. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. My backstory, I'm a superhero guy. My origin story, if you will. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I grew up. I wasn't from here, but I came here to go to law school almost 40 years ago. I got a law degree. I got an MBA from Ohio State, and started my career in a really big firm as a tax consultant, which was a great job. It was great pay. It was great everything, except I didn't want to do taxes for the rest of my life. So after about 6 years, I left to go into private practice. And I tell people that a funny thing happened to me when I went into private practice. And the funny thing was that nothing happened. I had no idea how to get clients. I was under the impression that I had great grades. I had a CPA at that point. I had more letters after my name than in my name. So at any rate, I was struggling to make this law practice go. And somebody said, you need to get into a tips club or a leads group. And I really didn't know what they were talking about, but they led me into an organization that was based out of Pittsburgh that, as I've described, got people together on a weekly basis. And I went and visited. They were starting a new group. And I'm like, this makes total sense, that you can lift your whole world just helping other people become successful and trusting that they'll do the same for you. So I got involved in that chapter, became its president, got really involved, had opportunities to help other groups. At one point, had an opportunity to buy the whole organization. This was in the early 2000s. And it wasn't that I didn't enjoy practicing law, Reagan. And as I shared with my wife way back then, 20 some years ago, I said, if I continue practicing law, I know where I'll be 30 years from now. It's not a bad life, but I know where I'll be. If I do this other thing, I have no idea where it leads, and that just excites me. That's just so, it's so cool. And I mean, look at all of us, right? I mean, Tessa, you didn't go to college, or, we didn't graduate high school or whatever saying I'm going to be a podcast, whatever. It's just, we find these adventures, and that's how I ended up on the adventure. But when that happened, when I bought that business, I really started to looking into franchising. And Reagan, you helped a lot early on, just kind of, getting my head around, okay, you don't know what you don't know. And you really helped shine a light on, hey, you need to do this and look at this. And there was a time where I didn't, I wondered if it would ever really happen. But we sell a franchise opportunity where I'll basically teach people how to start these groups using our name, using all of our materials. being able to network with all the other franchisees and directors around the country, and it's approaching like 40 people. It's getting huge. And you said, what's the advantage? And I always tell people, I tell people a lot of things, but one of the things I say is, would you rather rent an apartment or own the building? And most people say, well, I'd rather own the building. I said, well, then why are you just being a member in a networking group when you can own the networking group? You can be the front end of putting one of these groups together. And not everybody, that doesn't resonate with everybody, because as we know, not everybody is, even amongst the small business types, it's a scary notion to start something that people don't necessarily understand. But the people who understand it and realize, you know what, I can build a network, I can get paid for people being in that network, I can be the kingpin, I can be the leader of this whole network. That resonates with lots of people.
And he's not going to just allow anyone to be a franchisee because he doesn't care so much about the upfront fee. His really money comes from the royalties that'll come as they're successful. So whenever I've said to him, hey, I've got someone I could refer you that might be open to the opportunity. He doesn't have a business. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have anything. And Frank goes, that's not a fit. Yeah, he says he needs someone that would be synergistic to their current business. Frank, do you want to talk a little bit about that? I think of people like Dean Curry. It's so ideal for him. I even think of people like Tessa that build websites for people. And you've got a guy like that is a franchisee of yours that builds websites. Do you want to talk a little bit about the ideal candidate, if you will?
Yeah, and it's hard to describe the ideal candidate because they are, there's something inside people that you just can't see. People will always say to me, well, look at all your franchises, look at all the people, and, look for the common denominator. It's like, well, everybody does something different. I mean, Reagan, you're unique, right? Dean Curry is unique in what he does, and I've got realtors and financial advisors. And so it's not as easy as saying, oh, realtors are all great. They're perfect for it, because it's not necessarily true, but it's the person who, it's somebody who really needs to be networked. There's a high value with respect to what they do, and they need to be networked. That's the first thing. The second thing is that they have to have a willingness to help other people, because much of this is training people about the whole networking side of things. So it's really those two things that need to come into play. And certainly this is the caveat of all franchises. Got to be willing to follow a system. I remember talking to a guy somewhere in Pennsylvania. I think it was near Philadelphia, and right away he wanted to, the way I characterize it is that he wanted to he wanted to pay to drive on my road and then drive left of center, right, off-roading or whatever. He just, oh, this is great, and I'll do this, and this. It's like, no, we ride on the road. This is what works. So,
Tessa, anything you're thinking of? I didn't know of something.
No, I just think that when you're looking for those people too, they have to have a drive to find people to fill the groups. I'm a leader in a networking group, not like a lead weekly. We meet only once a month. I would rather do the weekly leads, though. I'll tell you, it does make a difference when you're meeting more regularly than what my group is. But I am in charge of filling it. So you have to have someone who's social, I feel like that's willing to say, hey, come into my group. And I know Regan's great. He has, he's just a very open, and, he talks to everyone. So you need that person who's willing to get out there and say, hey, come to my group.
Yeah, no, that's Regan.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing you didn't get kidnapped as a kid, because you talked to all sorts of strangers. And
Yeah, that's me. Another thing I want to bring up also is, and how many people do you have in your chapter? I mean, all over AmSpirit, close to 1,000 people, I would say now.
Oh no, it's well over 1,000 at this point. Yeah, it's and It's not that I'm not good with numbers, but the numbers change so often that it's just
Yeah.
kind of it's hard to know. People will say, how many chapters are there? It's like, I'm not really sure. Because I'm always the last to know. I'll sign every certificate that comes through, and it's like, well, where's the Vortex chapter? Oh, that's new and it's in Chicago. Oh, okay. So
How amazing that it's growing and it takes on a life of its own. So you started something and people are spreading the word for you.
yeah, no, I mean that's the other unique thing about the business is that it's really the clients that bring the other clients in.
Mm-hmm.
It's the members that I'll walk into. It used to be that I knew everybody who was in the organization and coming into the organization. Now I'll walk into a room and it's like, I don't know that person. I don't know that person. Somebody brought them in. So it's very rewarding.
Yeah. I wanted to close with two things. Number one was speaking of the opportunity that franchisees, again, it's made for someone that maybe is a small business owner and they feel that it would be synergistic to acquiring the franchise. Well, even sometimes before that, you can be an area director. Frank, do you do area directors everywhere for them to start, or do you tell them, let's see if you can start a chapter first? Is that kind of what you do as a little bit of a scrimmage game for them, Frank?
Yeah, it depends. Well, I guess just to clarify, we
Yeah,
do sell a franchise, and it's not for everybody. Not everybody has the money. Not everybody is willing to take the risk, if you will. And so in certain situations, I will say, okay, listen, don't worry about buying a franchise. Let's just focus in on starting a chapter. And if we can get it to go, then buying a franchise is always on the table. And I have had a number of people who have started that route and just then quickly said, okay, I understand how this works now. I'm more comfortable with the number, how the numbers work. And then they buy a franchise. And then I've had other people who, I've got a guy in Mississippi, wonderful person. He's like, I don't really want to buy a franchise. I just want to, I want to start a group. I want to help starting groups. For him, it's not about the financial opportunity of opening a franchise. It's more about our ability to help him create a network that he can step into and work in. And so as an area director, he makes some money, but he's not making as much as a franchise would. And he's okay with that because he's got this other business that really matters more to him than what the franchise opportunity is. So
yeah. So I wanted to mention there is an opportunity to make money. And I remember over 20 years ago when I first sat down with Frank and he was explaining to me how the opportunity works. And again, Tessa, this is why I'm launching a chapter here in this area. I would like to do that because I see it so synergistic to the new fund with Worthy Futures that you're helping me with. So I might have been about, like I said, 27, maybe 28 years old. And Frank is showing me different slides. He's got this kind of book open and he's saying, and you could make this much when you've got this many chapters. And I'm looking at the number and I knew this one person, we brought him up named Dean Curry. And I've always wanted to find out, what's he kind of making? And one day over drinks, I'm asking him a little bit more. I'm asking, and he looks at me and he goes, what are you trying to do, Reagan? Find out how much I make? Oh, no, not me. Just curious how many people. So Frank finally goes, you could make about this much. And I'm looking at the number and I said, So I'm just guessing, is that about around what Dean Curry makes? Frank goes, no, he makes about 3 times that. And I said, oh, well then, yes, this very much interests me. So then from there, Frank, we talked about this chapter that had been around for over 30 years. Frank said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll let you get started and I'll kind of give you this chapter. And can you believe this? I'm now embarrassed to admit it. And I say, wow, it's great. And how many others are you going to give me? I mean, that's just what happens when you give somebody a gift sometimes. They don't really appreciate it, right? And so instead of Frank saying, what are you, a welfare recipient? I mean, what do you also want me to just wire you money in here? Do you want me to just give you money instead? But instead, he said, Reagan, when I was in high school, I wanted a 10 speed. But my dad didn't just buy me one. So I did everything I could. I mowed lawns. And again, he lived in Michigan, so you don't have an opportunity to mow lawns very often. He said I would then walk and collect, was it bottle cans or aluminum
Yeah,
cans, Frank?
bottles and cans. Yeah. Well, in Michigan, they have returnable. Everything's returnable. Yeah.
And so it took him a while, but he finally had the money and he bought that 10 speed. And then the best part of the story, I still remember till this day, it was a little over 20 years ago. He has this dramatic pause, and then he says, and I still own that 10 speed till this day, and it's in my garage. So his point is, when someone gives you something, you don't really appreciate it. Go ahead, Frank. Did you want to say something else on that?
No, that's very true. I always contrast that story, and I don't have the bike anymore.
Oh, I
Well,
didn't.
He had
yeah,
it to that
yeah, I
day.
had it. Yeah, I am married. I don't have a lot of things I used to
Oh.
have. But I contrast that story because I had a friend of mine. It wasn't high school. It was more, I think, like sixth grade. I had a
Uh-huh.
friend whose parents bought him a 10 speed, almost the same time, and they weren't identical, but they were close enough. And his didn't last a year. And I rode it to work all the way. I was home in summers when I was in college. I rode it to work. I mean, it's just I kept having to replace the tires because the tires kept wearing out. I got a lot of use out of it.
But you
But
loved it and you cared for it.
well, I had a lot invested in it. I had a lot of sweat equity. So
Yes.
so
And Frank also is just, I mean, part of the role of the chapters, I mean, of when you are leading a chapter, especially even as a franchisee, you are mentoring those people and helping them. So when you get involved with AmSpirit, the other bonus is the amount of personal development there is on the back end of the website. You notice from Frank's bookshelf, he's a reader. He is an author, has written, what, 5 books have you? Or
well, technically, I've written 10. Two are
that's what I
novels,
thought. Yeah.
and two are not really in circulation. But yeah, I just do a lot of writing. Yeah.
So speaking of the personal development, and Tessa, you don't know how this story wraps up, but you're going to love it. There was somebody I knew that also was living in Columbus, Ohio for a while, and he was kind of not doing well. And he was living with his sister, sleeping on her couch. And the way I met this guy is sometimes he'd go to chamber events. But when he went to chamber events, he went there to have dinner. So he'd be eating the cheese and whatever stuff there on the side. And he then thought of an idea. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to interview a bunch of people that are successful, meaning they've at least they're self-employed. I just want to interview as many people as possible. So he said, hey, Regan, I'd like to sit down with you, mostly because he knew that I knew other people that I could refer him to. So I said, tell you what, I'll let you come over to my place. Comes over to my home. Great conversation with him. He's a good listener. He's interviewing me, if you will. And then he said, I know that you know so-and-so. I'm not going to mention this person's name, but this person was very well known. He said, is there any way you could get me in the door with him? I go, oh, you don't know what you're asking. He goes, I'm not here to sell him anything. I don't have anything to sell. I just want to pick his brain. I want to listen to him, and I want to learn from successful people. So I call this guy up, and he says, what does this guy do? He asks more questions. Tell me about it. And he said, Regan, this guy doesn't have a job, doesn't have a business. He's living with his sister, sleeping on her couch. Come on, man. And you're hanging out with this guy? Let me tell you what that guy is. He says, he's a loser. He says, no, I don't want you connecting me with a loser, because that's what he's always going to be. It's like, oh. So then I say to this guy, I've got someone else I'm going to refer you to. Frank Agin. Well, Frank Agin didn't say he was a loser. Frank even invited him to his home several times, right?
Oh yeah, my kids revel at how much he could eat.
Yeah. And we'll get to who the person is. Then they wrote a book together. Do you want to know who that person is, Tessa?
I
Have you
do.
ever heard of the podcast Seeds of Greatness, the School of Greatness, excuse me, Lewis Howes?
Oh, that sounds familiar. I think you might have sent something to me about that.
If you look up Lewis Howes, he's very well known. Look up his net worth. The guy's a multimillionaire, over 10 million. It shows on him. And he's got the spot. Yeah, that's him. School of Greatness.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. Wow. That was where he started. Oh.
And Frank was the one that would mentor him. Frank was the person that believed in him. And there are other stories of people like that as well.
Well,
Yeah,
that's so...
he in his newer book, he tells the story of how we met and how he got me on LinkedIn. And I still remember he showed me, because I thought LinkedIn was this, and people are sending me these invites back in 2006, 2000. I thought it was a Ponzi scheme or something. I'm too busy for this. And he sat down, he showed me, and I pulled out a checkbook and I wrote him a check for $100. He said, "What are you doing?" I was like, "This is a game changer for me."
Right.
He said at that moment,
sure.
I realized I had something. I had value that I could sell, so yeah.
So Frank, did you guys technically, because he knew who you were, you guys met at, was it Toastmasters when I had invited you to our Toastmaster group? Is that how you met?
It wasn't your Toastmaster group. It was one at Grange Insurance, and I was just there.
That was the one I went to.
Yeah, and he just came up and we hit it off, and he's just, but I think there's a lesson in there that every contact has opportunity, and
Absolutely.
Not everybody's going to turn into Lewis Howes, but we can all help other people through the people we know, and I'm happy for him. I'm proud of him, and it's nice to know I had a little bit in that journey. So.
And then the last thing I'll wrap up, which is why I did this here at my home versus at my office, is that, like I said, Frank has also been a great mentor to me. And I remember when I went through my divorce, I didn't want anyone to kind of know. And Frank just touched base. "Hey, how are you guys doing?" "I am doing fine." I email him back. Then another time. And then finally I had to come clean. And I'm like, "I don't know how to tell you this, but we're divorced." And since then, Tessa, I had gotten a lot of horrible advice from people, right? And nothing was good. And instead you notice how Frank is so good at stories. And he said to me, I still remember, because I was right here at the moment, I was standing right there. And he said, "I want you to think about this. He told me a story about how he liked this gal. And he thought that maybe there was going to be a little bit more to that relationship. So he chose to go to law school at the Ohio State University." Is that somewhat the story? And then he gets down there and it turns out she maybe wasn't as into him as he was. And so he thought, what am I going to do? And here he thought, okay, I'll go to law school for 3 years and then that's it, leave this area. And God had him and placed him there for a reason. And now he's very well known in that area, has helped so many people out, and very well known. And so then he says to me, "Reagan, you could live anywhere, but you choose to live in Coral Gables. Why do you live here?" And that moment, I remember just turning around and looking right there at that building. And I thought, that was the best advice I was given. And I thought, I'm staying here and I'm building something here, including an AmSpirit chapter. So thank you, Frank.
Well,
this has been awesome. Thank you for we got stories, we got advice, we got a lot of wisdom from both of you. So thank you so much. And if you guys have any questions about AmSpirit, it's amspirit.com, correct?
Yep.
And they can go check out the chapters and everything. If they want to look into a franchise opportunity, they reach out to you directly.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to whomever. It's always a fruitful conversation. They may not be interested. maybe not in the moment, maybe later, or maybe they know somebody, and that's just the whole, that's how things get built.
And if you're where Reagan is, you can find out about the new chapter
Yeah.
that's coming. So that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. And we're here every Friday at noon Pacific time. Don't forget to hit the bell so you get reminders, and we'll see you all next week. Have a